Welcome back, AP. So we left off in class talking about this stuff. All right, so we got to about the directory phase, right? We talked about how the directory phase is going to be the most boring phase out of the entire revolution. The radical phase is, of course, the most fun. The National Assembly is a close second. I don't even like to consider the Napoleonic phase a part of the revolution itself. However, it does help you kind of chunk up where he sits in this entire thing and that he actually is himself related to the revolution, right? Now, however, that's my personal favorite phase. Just going to throw that out there, the Napoleonic phase. Just because Napoleon's my favorite figure in all of history. I think that European history dates should just be revised and just be before Napoleon, after Napoleon. All right, so anyway, here are your dates. Make sure you jot them down. But I'm going to get going so you don't have to actually sit here and watch me talk about these four different phases for a minute while you write this stuff down. So now, we got into the storming of the Bastille, right? Talked about how the poor got 29,000 muskets from a hospital of it, or from a hospital of invalids, right? Talked about how a bunch of them died in the process. 98 of them total, right? The Swiss mercenaries, heads on pikes. The revolution has now gone violent. The National Assembly is now in charge. Lafayette is the commander of their guardsmen. Stuff's hitting the fan, all right? So speaking of and all this other stuff, the August Decrees and the Great Fear, as you can see, right? I know y'all got upset. You had to cross it out on class and stuff like that, but it'll be okay. They're going to be the next phase, next events anyway, okay? So this is one of my most famous lines from the entirety of European history, and it's a good one. Apparently, when the storming of the Bastille was happening, Louis looked over at one of his advisors and said, dude, is it a riot? And his advisor said, no, sir, it's a revolution, right? So all kinds of crazy stuff has happened. Jacques Necker is back, right? He was actually dismissed leading up to the storming of the Bastille, and now he's back again, okay? So he's been actually brought back. Now, while Louis hides away in Versailles, make a star next to that. It's a very important premise. He is hiding away in Versailles. Stuff is going to start getting crazy. Because when you think about, the storming of the Bastille, the Estates General, the failure of the Estates General, the Assembly of Notables, the Parlement of Paris, right? All this stuff is happening in Paris or close to it, right? Very, very close by. Well, it wasn't just going on there, okay? Because the August Decrees were an afterthought of this thing called the Great Fear. Because while Louis was hiding away in Versailles, the poor people of the countryside, these old serfs and stuff like that, started fearing that there might be a noble uprising, right? The nobles might stand up and maybe start punching 1-2s at the peasants to keep them from joining this revolution. So, out of this fear and rumors that are coming around about a noble reprisal, the Great Fear hits. And it's straight up rioting in the countryside, right? It looked exactly like this. So, it was absolute rioting in the countryside. People are being killed and shot. The nobles are actually having their houses burned down, their chateaus destroyed. What do you think, though, the peasants were after? Anybody? I hear a lot of good ideas, but what they're actually after, of course, bread. I heard you say it, Haley. The other big thing they're after are the feudal contracts that bind them to the land, right? So they're burning their feudal contracts. They're destroying the houses that they live on. They're destroying enclosures. They're knocking down fences and trying to make it communal property again. The people are going crazy. They're burning feudal contracts, taking back common lands, destroying enclosures. They're doing all kinds of nut stuff, and the nobles are demanding for some help out here, right? The nobles are like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So what's going to happen in response to the Great Fear, which is a very important event that sometimes gets glossed over, heavily, in a lot of historical accounts of the French Revolution. But in response, the August Decrees are going to come down, right? Also known as, if you're going to make it an event, you call it the night of August the 4th, right? And what happens on the night of August the 4th is one at a time, in the middle of the giant meeting hall where the National Assembly itself was formed. I believe it was there anyway. The National Assembly marched and paraded the First and Second Estate in front of everyone. So they had to sign away and abolish feudal dues, forced labor, the tithe, church lands were stripped from them, all kinds of other stuff. So basically what the August Decrees did is kind of destroyed feudalism in France, right? Feudalism in France is gone. Write that somewhere. Feudalism is done. The estates are done. The ancient regime is done. It's all over. Now everyone is supposedly a part of the same garbage heap, right? So the night of August the 4th is a very, very important event, okay? Because feudalism outlawed, feudal dues outlawed, forced labor outlawed, the tithe outlawed, strip church lands, all this stuff, very important. Now, Louis, however, is still going to be the king, right? I know some of you are like, well, wait a minute, this is dumb. Like, you get rid of all this other stuff where all this wealth resides, but why would you still allow Louis to be king, right? I heard you, Anthony O'Toole. I heard you over there. Jillian, I know she's upset too. Well, the reason being is because they didn't want to remember, the goal was never to get rid of Louis, right? The goal was never, I'm going to put my face right over here. So the goal was never to get rid of Louis. The goal was to bring him down to everyone else's level, right? To create a new and better system. Because absolutism is old and lame, and constitutional monarchy is the cool wave that everybody's riding these days, right? So Louis, yes, is still the king of the people, right? But what they needed now was to sit down and create a document that they wanted, that they thought, symbolized the motives of the people. So Marquis de Lafayette actually sat and met with Thomas Jefferson himself, and they created the new and the first Constitution of the French people called it's on August 27th, 1789. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. But, like, when you say these parts together, it sounds really cool. You know what I mean? Like, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And then when you put "and of the citizen," like, or "and of citizenry," and it, like, that just kind of lames it up a little bit. So we're just going to keep calling it the all right? So, like, it's very, very cool document, though. And this is actually what it looked like. Just to give you a heads up, it's only 2 pages long, right? And the fact that it's only 2 pages long is really important, is because it's a short preamble, and then the list of the 17, sorry. The list of the 17 articles that represent the new rights of every human being under the new government of France and the National Assembly, right? So, there we go. All right. The great thing about it only being 2 pages long, too, is what could happen to it now, Denny. Good job. It could be printed and shot all over Europe. And I know Denny didn't even say the response. That was actually Annie Hatch over there saying good stuff. Proud of you. Awesome. Now, these things include a lot of different rights, okay? A lot of different rights. But it's not your average document, all right? It's not your average document because the preamble itself, like, alludes, of course, to God, so you do have some deism that's still a part of this document. It also, of course, alludes to the idea that it is seeking natural equality between people, but there is an ideology split in it, okay? When we look at the Declaration of Independence, right, it sets up a new government that no one had ever seen, right? Mostly pioneered by your guy, Thomas Jefferson, right? So the ideas of a multi-branched house, or a multi-branch government, including a house and a judiciary branch, and almost like your monarch with the executive branch, the idea of creating like the triangular shape of the government to create a limited government where the people and the government share the same responsibilities, right? But then in this particular document, though, there are several things that implore civic duties. There are several things that implore the general will, all right, of Rousseau. Write the general will down somewhere next to his name. The general will. Underline it, star it, highlight it, put a little smiley face next to it so I know that you didn't mute me, all right? That way I can give you full credit for this flip. Now, this stuff is very important, though, because Rousseau's ideas about the general will and how basically the people give the power to the king, not the other way around, all right? So with this, Louis, is in the Declaration of the Rights of Man, is now the king of the French, right? And in this document, like you can see Jefferson's ideas coming out of like natural, every man is born free and remains free, even though slavery is still a thing in Haiti. Who was that? All right, so now, anyway, that's your Jeffersonian ideas. But then, like I said, the civic duties, the general will, the ideas that Rousseau believes that every man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains, right? So, very important to understand that it is very, like, ideologically split and kind of foreshadows the radical phase of the French Revolution because the hands of the people begin to be directly involved, right? So, it laid down the new rights under the new regime of France. That's important. I only got 5 more minutes to go because I got to keep it under 15, all right? This is important, though. Create this chart, all right? So, draw this chart with me. You can pause it when I get done and draw the whole thing, but you do need to listen and pay attention, okay? Because this actually really, really alludes to where the entirety of European content's going, all right? So it's all about power. It's all about the struggle for power, who has it, who doesn't, where is it limited, where is it enforced, things like that, right? Well, our red line here represents one phase of power in the government, and our green represents another. Your red represents your king or ruling class or your upper class. Your green represents your people, right? Your commoners, your everyday. Okay? When you look at the beliefs of European politics and political ideologies in this phase of the late 1700s, okay, there are three people you can use with the French Revolution to really describe how multiple beliefs are popping up about how people should be ruled, right? You got Louis, right? You got Jefferson, you got Rousseau. Now, three different groups believe power resides in three different places or proportions, okay? Because Louis represents your conservatives, Jefferson represents your classical liberals, very important distinction, classical liberals, all right? And then Rousseau represents your proto-socialists. Okay, alarmed, alarm, alarm, stop freaking out. Other historians, so many other historians are always like, oh, Rousseau is not a proto-socialist. He believes in direct democracy, blah, blah, blah. He's proto-socialist in his ideas that literally, like, are going to turn it. His ideas inspire Marx, all right? So I call him proto-socialist, so leave me alone. Now, anyway, what I'm going to use to represent power in this chart is this rainbow, because I couldn't find any other really like powerful symbols that Prezi provides without me having to download stuff on my computer. So the rainbow is where power sits. So conservatives believe, of course, that the power should sit with the ruling class above. Classical liberals believe that it should be a limited government directly elected by the people so that it should be split evenly and shared amongst everyone. Whereas proto-socialists and Rousseau believe that the people should actually have all of the power, right? So, and that the ruling class is almost a subject to them because every man in his natural state is virtuous, right? So, yeah, right. All right, now, anyway, but this is a good chart to understand where this whole thing is going, okay? Now we got one more little story to talk about. It's going to take me a second to explain it, all right? So, all right, here we go. We got enough time. This is your man, Maximilien Robespierre, right? Guy that's been making a name for himself this entire time. He starts the Jacobin Club. That's spelled Jacobin, okay? He starts becoming a heavy hitter, all right? He helps write the Declaration of the Rights of Man. He helps get the ideas in there, and he starts pushing it forward. One of the biggest things that he believes in is the freedom of the press, right? And so that's why when we were talking about the pamphlets taking away the power of the kings and things like that, that's why they had to be pamphlets. They couldn't be newspapers because they were so muzzled by the monarchy and they weren't allowed to say anything or whatever. So the biggest thing about the biggest thing about Robespierre, though, is that he influenced this guy, this really ugly person who looks like a Muppet, Jean-Paul Marat, right? So Jean-Paul Marat had actually been a very, very poor person because he had a lot of failed careers. He actually ended up living in the sewers of Paris at one point, and he got a skin disease, and so he had to spend a long time of every day in a medical bath. Just remember that, medical bath, Jean-Paul Marat. But he actually writes this newspaper called L'Ami des Peuples, all right? What it means, though, is friend of the people, right? Friend of the people. Now, in this, he describes a crazy event that had actually just happened after the storming of the Bastille, and it was something very audacious. The king had actually thrown a flippin' party, all right? He threw a party that was lavish and huge and had bread and had all of this stuff. And he wrote about it in his paper. He was like, what the heck is going on? The king's throwing a party? And apparently at the party, they took the new tricolor cockade, right? The new tricolor flag, and threw it to the ground and spit on it and stomped on it and all this other stuff. So what ended up happening is on October 5th, this giant group of women from the market started assembling, some of them known as fish women because they actually carried heavy carts and stuff like that. And they came armed with scalers and knives and things like that. And they were demanding bread for their families, and encouraged by people like Marat, they began to actually start marching towards Versailles because someone grabbed a drum. They were like, doom, 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 and actually began going, right? Planning on destroying Versailles and taking the bread of which they resided in there with it, because if the king's getting fat and having parties and crap like that, then we're going to go actually take it from them, right? So the Marquis de Lafayette immediately springs to action. He was like, oh crap, if I don't go ahead and slow them down, oh god, they got cannons, right? They grabbed two cannons, and they start dragging them with them up there, and then it started raining, all right? So Marquis de Lafayette, though, follows them there, and eventually the women are going to invade the palace, right? They're going to actually invade the palace and get to the king. They're going to kill guardsmen. They almost killed Marie Antoinette. If it hadn't been for the Marquis de Lafayette, they all would have been dead. All right, so now I'll tell you the story. Just remind me about it, okay? About how did Lafayette actually save the rules and stuff like that. So just ask me, and then I'll elaborate on it. But you just need to know the Women's March. But the biggest thing about the Women's March is the effect. All right, the effect of the Women's March is the king and the family was forced. Write this down. Forced to return to Paris, all right? So that's the Women's March. We'll go in depth more with the Women's March when we come into class, and I'll tell you the whole story, like how it started and things like that. But I don't have enough time because I promised you 15 minutes. But I'll see you guys later. Have a great weekend, Company Catholic. Go flipping birds. Saints are bad. Let's go. Have a great weekend.